Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here's a look at some of the top stories that we have lined up for you. Shots ring out Thursday at a BC ostrich farm as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency begins culling hundreds of ostriches. Plus, the Liberals' federal budget survives 2 confidence votes and will need to survive 1 more to avoid an early election. And the province of Alberta looks at the possibility of raising speed limits on divided highways.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. It's a sad ending for one family after a months-long fight. Gunshots rang out Thursday night at Universal Ostrich Farm near Edgewood, British Columbia, as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency proceeded with the cull of about 300 ostriches it claims were infected by avian flu. The cull was ordered after roughly 70 infected ostriches were detected at the farm last December. Although the owners claimed the remaining birds had developed herd immunity, the cull went ahead after the Supreme Court of Canada declined to hear an appeal to save the flock. Here's what it sounded like Thursday night, and a warning: this content could be disturbing.
Are you serious?
After they're done shooting, that's exactly what they're doing.
It's ship cave, right?
What? Sure evilness! With all the shots that they've done, I'm sure them all.
On Friday, the CFIA confirmed the, quote, depopulation had taken place using sharpshooters. A holding pen that had once been full of ostriches is now filled with long blue tarps covering objects on the ground that are also shrouded with black sheeting. In other news, the Liberal government has survived another confidence vote ahead of its budget, which will face a vote in the coming weeks. The House of Commons recorded a vote of 307 against 30 in favor of a Bloc Québécois motion to reject the budget. The vote comes one day after the Bloc and NDP teamed up to vote against a Conservative motion that called on MPs to reject the budget. The budget itself is scheduled to go to a vote during the week of November 17th. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was talking about the federal budget in Toronto on Friday before an economic club of Canada. Poilievre says there's nothing in the budget to make life more affordable for Canadians who are struggling.
Today, a poll came out saying 20% of Canadians are not paying their bills so that they can afford to feed their families. We have malnutrition. We have 10% of our country that told a food bank survey recently that they are skipping meals sometimes for an entire day because they can't afford to eat. This, of course, is the result of a costly government. Costly government drives up the cost of living. Now, in the last election, Mark Carney promised that he was going to be different. The Liberal Party was, see, the lights are going out because the energy prices are so high. It's that industrial carbon tax again.
Poilievre says this promise-breaking budget has done nothing but increase the crushing debt Canadians will face for generations to come. As we reported Thursday, Alberta Conservative MP Matt Jeanerou has announced his resignation. The MP for Edmonton Riverbend says he will step down in the spring. This comes just days after another Conservative crossed the House floor to join the Liberals. Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont left the Conservative caucus after the Liberals tabled their budget. Jeanerou, meanwhile, quashed any rumors of crossing the floor himself. In a statement, he said he hoped to address the House of Commons one final time in the future. He would only say he needed to turn his focus entirely to his family, and he asked that the media not contact his family during this time. The Alberta government has announced an 11-member cabinet committee that will look into class size and classroom complexity. During the recent teachers' strike, members of the Teachers Association wanted the government to negotiate student-teacher ratios into a new deal. But Premier Danielle Smith says this cabinet committee will dig deeper and find better solutions.
Throughout November, Alberta's government will continue working with school boards to collect data on class sizes and composition. That data will help us set the criteria to guide the Minister of Education and Childcare in allocating resources to classrooms and to inform our work to reduce complexity and address classroom disruptions. Over the coming months, the Cabinet Committee will also hear from school boards and educators, educational assistants, complex needs specialists, parents and others to gather the feedback that we need to make effective decisions about funding and targeting resources.
I'm also pleased to announce today as well the creation of a teacher advisory council. Teachers are at the heart of our schools. Their ideas and experiences help us make good decisions about class size and classroom complexity. The advisory council will work directly with the Minister of Education and Childcare to share teachers' voices and to ensure that they're elevated to the highest level. The Council will operate continuously for the next 2 years and meet regularly to talk about what is happening in our classrooms and to provide more details about what teachers need.
Nicolaides and Smith say besides members of Cabinet, this new committee will also include representatives from school boards and the Alberta Teachers Association. At Friday's news conference, Smith was asked for her reaction to the federal budget unveiled on Tuesday and how optimistic she is about getting pipelines built. Smith says while the federal deficit is a concern, it's a sign of a bigger problem.
I don't think there's a single province that's running a surplus, and that should tell us something, that we have increasing demands on social services and revenue isn't keeping up. And revenue's not keeping up because we're chasing private sector investment away. So I'm still working with the federal government to see if we can come up with a memorandum of understanding so that we can get a bitumen pipeline to Asian markets, as well as the Pathways project, as well as remove some of the bad laws that will allow for that investment to occur. So I hope to have more to say next week before Grey Cup.
There were some promising signs Friday from Prime Minister Carney about Alberta and oil when he spoke at an event hosted by the Canadian Club Toronto.
The future of oil export is going to be low carbon. So twinning additional, in that case, oil sands development with carbon capture makes sense. By the way, it also helps create a multi-billion-dollar industry for Canada. Sometimes this discussion about energy pivots down into, is this pipeline going to happen? That is, I mean, don't worry, we look at those issues. It is a totally different ballgame. You look at the scale, sorry, now you've got me on a run, because you look at the scale of LNG exports that are going to come. The first shipment of LNG to Asia was in June from LNG 1. We'll be at 50 million tons by the end of this decade. It's likely to double by the end. And every single jurisdiction, I was in Asia last week, every single government wants that LNG. Right? We're in a position, we are putting ourselves in a position to export that. And by the way, that LNG, which will displace coal in most cases, so there's environmental benefit. Don't worry, we're on the pipeline stuff. Danielle's on line 1. Don't worry, it's going to happen. But, well, something's going to happen. Let's put it that way. It's not very good negotiating by my perspective.
The province of Alberta is also looking into the possibility of raising the speed limits on divided highways by asking for public input on the matter. As of Friday, Albertans can share their thoughts on an online survey that will ask them about raising the speed limit from 110 kilometers an hour to 120. The survey asks what highways should be prioritized for a speed increase, and for Albertans' thoughts on limiting commercial trucks to the far right lanes on highways with 3 lanes or more. Premier Danielle Smith says the speed limit on the QE2 needs to be addressed.
If the QE2 has been built and rated for 120 kilometers an hour, why aren't we letting people drive 120 kilometers an hour? If a lot of the frustration on that road is that you've got semi-vehicles trying to pass each other, blocking the lanes, why don't we have a law in place that the semis have to be over on the far right so that it allows for clear passage? So it is a pilot project. We're going to be monitoring very closely to make sure that we don't end up with any problems, any additional accidents or collisions. But I think I think most people would look at that and say, if you can do it there, maybe there's other places you can do it. So that's what he's doing. He's doing it as a pilot project. And we'd be more than happy to hear feedback from others if they think that there's a mismatch between the way the road has been built and what the posted speed limit is.
Following the survey, the government will run a mini trial of the 110-kilometer-per-hour speed limit to assess the impact of higher speeds and driver behavior. The survey is open until December the 12th. And while we're talking about traveling at high speeds, air travelers across North America faced travel delays Friday thanks to a decision by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration to reduce traffic by 10% at major airports. The cities involved include New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, along with about 40 other hubs across the country. The FAA says the move is being made to maintain travel safety as air traffic controllers exhibit signs of strain after missing paychecks because of the U.S. government shutdown. Here's one traveler's story that reads like a scene from the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
So I had a flight this morning, 8:05 on Air Canada. I was in Connecticut. I take an Uber to get here in time. When I'm in the Uber, all of a sudden they canceled my flight. So it says you were rebooked. So I'm in the Uber and I'm like, oh, okay, great. I'm rebooked for an hour earlier. So I'm panicking, will I even make it to Newark and catch the flight? 7:05 now was the flight. So I say to the Uber guy, I'm like, we gotta go fast. Then all of a sudden I pull up the whole itinerary. Are you ready for this? They rebooked me at a JFK an hour earlier with a 11-hour layover in some place called Port of Spain. Crazy, crazy. So of course I can't take that flight. Wouldn't get in until tomorrow morning. And I was only going away for the weekend for 2 days. So we don't end there, right? So I'm calm. I'm a surgeon. I'm used to chaos. You have to just think logically. So I'm like, okay, I talked to a few people here. They're saying, if I were you, I would not travel over the next 3 days. It's going to get worse. TSA said that to me, and the airline counters said it like unofficially. They can't, right? But they gave me their take. So I'm like, okay, I'll go get a rental car. Because I have a Connecticut license and the flight was canceled, they won't rent me a car. Guess what I have to do? I'm going to U-Haul. And I'm going to drive a truck cross country to get back to Utah because I have to be back by Tuesday.
Those poor travelers. I feel for them. In local news, it's been 3 months since a semi-truck carrying heavy equipment struck the underside of the Whip-Up Drive Bridge back on August the 6th. The city of Lethbridge has completed several phases of planning and preparation, and now the Director of Infrastructure Services has announced the final phase of repairs is scheduled to begin next week on November the 10th. BCN's Heidi Echevarria has more details.
4 of the 6 steel girders were damaged, 2 of them extensively. Since then, we have worked very hard to plan with this repair with the right away and to start.
According to Joel Sanchez, this kind of planning and reparation jobs take time and can't be rushed. In addition, only a few contractors in Canada are qualified to perform this type of work, and some of the materials needed to repair the bridge were difficult to secure.
We also had to plan carefully around electrical wires that run under the bridge inside the girder. Some of the repairs include placing a structure to support the cracks and the damage that were under the bridge. In some cases, some girders are going to be a simple repair, but for most of them, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. Just reinforce the structure where the damage happened. So what we're doing is coordinating with the electrical department to do that work. We already have a plan in place to remove those moving forward. Like any new electrical feed or any wiring that goes to the west side nowadays is done through directional drilling. So we go underneath the river. That particular work was done in the early 80s, so that's where we're just catching up with the new changes that we're doing.
Sanchez said the bridge will have new measures to limit vehicle height, which were not previously in place, and the city will ensure the restrictions are foolproof with a fail-safe mechanism before the bridge.
So basically the work or the repair that we're doing is to put the bridge back to the previous state. This will help us also to ensure that we're doing other measures to prevent this from happening in the future, but it will allow us to ensure that the life cycle and the life of the bridge will be the same that we had before.
With the hope that the construction won't impact residents financially, he said.
Our intention is that this should not affect taxation.
On the other hand, the final phase of work is expected to be completed by Friday, December the 12th, weather permitting. In the meantime, the speed limits will remain as they are for now. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Work is scheduled on weekdays from 7:30 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. In an effort to attract more Canadian tourists to the United States, the city of Kalispell, Montana, has released a Canadian welcome pass with a list of discounts and deals to some of the city's businesses and attractions. The city, which is just over a 3-hour drive from Lethbridge and sits south of Glacier National Park, serves as one of Montana's primary tourist hubs. Discover Kalispell, the city's tourist marketing agency, has created a mobile sign-up pass for Canadians, which will grant them deals in 15 lodging, retail, dining businesses, and museums. The agency says they miss Canadians and are putting their money where their mouths are to provide a pass specialized for them. The city, like other destinations across the U.S., have struggled to attract Canadian tourists in the past year. According to the latest Angus Reid poll, 71% of Canadians say they have not traveled to the U.S. in the past 12 months, compared to 56% in 2023. Technology can do some fascinating things, and thanks to mapping technology, researchers are now walking in the footsteps of Romans. Researchers have created an interactive map which lets users see how the ancient network of Roman roads crisscrossed the empire from Africa and Arabia across the Mediterranean to Europe.
Now, for the first time, having access to the spatially detailed open data set of Roman roads allows us to understand where did these phenomena flow through this massive region? What was the impact? What were areas that were particularly vulnerable, particularly susceptible? And what is the overall development over very long timescales of these phenomena that have really shaped our history? It conquered areas that were already densely urbanized with a vast net of existing roads. The Romans continued to use them. They upgraded them. An important contribution by the Romans is that they connected up all of those local road systems. So for the very first time, it was possible to move overland from Syria to Spain, for example, these vast distances. It was truly the first continental scale terrestrial transport infrastructure.
The Roman road network on this interactive map is almost 300,000 kilometers. Incredible to think about. For the second straight month, economists were caught off guard with job growth instead of job losses. Stats Canada says the economy added 67,000 jobs in October. We get more from Michelle Zadikian with the Canadian Press.
The gains were enough to push the unemployment rate down to 6.9%. The wholesale and retail trade sector and transportation and warehousing industry drove the gains. The increase comes after an unexpected gain of 60,000 positions in September. StatCan says job gains over October and September now more than offset the sharp drop seen in August and July. The report also had some good news for young people. After struggling for months in a tough labor market, youth aged 15 to 24 saw 21,000 jobs added last month, driving the youth jobless rate down to 14.1% after hitting a 15-year high in September outside the pandemic. CIBC Capital Markets says the jobs data supports the Bank of Canada's stance that its benchmark rate at 2.25% is now low enough to stimulate the economy, and it's forecasting no more rate cuts from here.
Alberta's unemployment rate held steady at 7.8% last month. Calgary's unemployment was 7.9% and Edmonton's was 8.6%, both largely unchanged in October. Canadian pipeline company Enbridge has earned $682 million in its third quarter. That's significantly lower than the $1.29 billion profit it recorded in the same quarter last year. Enbridge says the operating revenue also edged lower to about $14.6 billion. In relation, on Friday, Enbridge announced that they will formally gauge interest next year in a second phase on its mainline crude pipeline network. If the project were to go ahead, it could add another 250,000 barrels per day of additional capacity by 2028 to help meet the rising export demand from Canadian oil shippers. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 43 to 29,912. The Dow was up 74 to 46,987. The S&P 500 was up 8 to 6,728, and the Nasdaq was down 49 to 23,004. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 31 cents to $59.74 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to $4.28 US. Gold was up 30.74 to $40.0787 US an ounce, and silver was up 36 cents to $48.39 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.21 per bushel, barley is at $5.66, canola is at $14.51, and corn is at $7.29 per bushel. Live cattle December contract was up $2.57 to $221.35. Feeder cattle were up $4.35 to $326.40, and lean hog December contract was up 42 cents to $79.40. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at $71.20 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency confirmed Friday it carried out the cull of some 300 ostriches at Universal Ostrich Farm near Edgewood, British Columbia. The cull came after the Supreme Court of Canada said Thursday it would not hear the owner's appeal to save the flock from being destroyed after several birds died from avian flu back in December. The CFIA says it consulted with experts and concluded the most humane option to kill the birds was to use a professional marksman. Shots were heard coming from the farm late last night and early this morning. Well, it was budget week, and we've been hearing a lot of reactions about it. Up next, we hear more sobering facts about what the interest charges on our debt will actually cost taxpayers, how there doesn't appear to be a plan to balance the budget, and what this could mean for future generations. My interview with Chris Sims of the Canadian Taxpayers Association is coming up. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.